We have a really exciting guest joining us. We have Vicky from Tender Response. Vicky's here to educate the audience and provide some real-world insights into the bid writing process. She helps UK SMEs improve how they tender for public sector contracts. So today we'll be diving into everything public procurement. So thanks for joining us, Vicky. And I'd like to kick off the podcast with asking you to give our audience an overview of your journey and how you came to sit here today.
Oh, wonderful. Well, firstly, it's great to be here. I think this podcast is relatively new, so I'm quite privileged to be one of the first people to be joining. And yeah, my journey. Wow. So I started out in telecoms. I fell into that after finishing my maths degree. Now, I don't want to put anyone off there because I do have a sense of humour despite having a maths degree. And I fell into telecoms and I was responsible for international voice traffic, which sounds very interesting. It is, but it sounds quite boring when you actually get down to the nuts and bolts of it. It's making sure that when you go on holiday, your telephone calls connect, essentially. And I could speak geek. So I very quickly went from that into like the UK national voice. I sat as part of the pre-sales team. And then from there, everyone always used to get really excited whenever there was a bid. There was a bid on the go because that's where you'd get a piece of business that was going to last between 3 and 10 years. And it was mucho dollar. It was lots of money. And that's when everyone stood up, pulled all the mad hours. And then when you had those successes, it was like felt around the entire office. It didn't matter if you weren't part of that team who was doing the bid because when someone else was working on that bid, you were kind of like picking up the work for them. So it was like a wider team feel. And then I was fortunate enough that the company that I was working for at the time, we got bought out and I had the opportunity to take redundancy and leave. And I ended up working for a much smaller telecoms company doing bids. And I was the junior on the team and I very quickly flew through the ranks. Fast forward, I'm not going to say how many years, but 1 or 2 years. And I'm kind of running the show. So I have my selection of bid people underneath me. So bid managers, bid coordinators and bid administrators. I've got salespeople underneath me as well who are going out and doing all the pre-market engagements with NHS, central government, local government. And then COVID happened. I had a couple of life-changing events and I just decided life was too short. So I left corporate world and I didn't know what I was going to do. So Tender Response ended up being created and now we help SMEs to make money and find money. And that's what we do.
Lovely stuff. And you have a really unique USP, which I'd love you to tell our audience about.
Well, yeah. So as Tender Response was being created, I decided to throw my name in the ring in local elections. So I was obviously successful. I am an elected member to council, but the unique thing where only a handful of people have actually had the experience of is actually being responsible for procurement from a supplier perspective as well as a unitary authority perspective. So at the time of this recording, I'm an elected member to West Berkshire Council, which has the responsibility from a portfolio holder perspective of procurement and commissioning. There are a few other bits in there as well, but I have the responsibility for those.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that definitely sets you apart and, like we were discussing, allows you to see things from the other side of the fence as well. I'd like to start off by having you bust some common myths in the bid writing world.
Shoot.
So if you could give us some common misconceptions when it comes to actually bidding for contracts, what do you think some misconceptions are?
Oh, wow. Well, the one that I get is that it's not just about price. So that one's not the most common one. The most common one that I get is, it's always going to go back to the existing bidder, the incumbent. Well, you'll actually find that when it comes to construction and hard facilities, soft facilities, they're actually the easier things to change. So typically now, especially with local government reorganisation and where a lot of councils at the moment are struggling for their monies, they have to do things differently. So the way that I'm seeing this, and this isn't just within my council, it's also within a lot of other councils up and down the country, that they are using more and more frameworks. So when you apply to be on the framework, and that framework, that's the hard application. you're spending a lot of time and effort to apply to a framework where you get to write your 2,500 words about your approach to project management and everything else. And because there's no guaranteed work off the back of it, a lot of organizations are kind of removing themselves from that. Those are the instances now where you need to push, because once you're on that framework, you're there. And then from there, it will be, oh, so Joe Blogs, you are a construction company who builds classrooms. Oh, fantastic. Can you give us a quote for these 5 items, please, at our local school? And that could be a request that comes to you and a handful of other organizations from that framework. So that's where everything needs to be, because it's not all about one supplier. And a lot of procurements at the moment as well, they are moving away from one big tier 1 company, and they are under the Public Procurement Act 2023. And yes, I have read it. It's a very long read. It came into effect in February this year. In that act, they say that a percentage of all public sector spending has to be within the SME tier. Now, the SME tiering, you've got to have less than 250 employees. You've got to turn over less than I'm gonna get this wrong, but I think it's something like 20 million. And in order to be hitting those numbers, you've got to be of a significant size. So you have to be within that space, which is all of your local cleaning companies. It's all of your local electricians, your sparkies, your small construction companies. It's exactly the kind of space where you should be there. And the question where you said it's all about price, no, it's not. So under the Public Procurement Act, again, I'm going back to this again. Sorry, everybody. They say in there that, you have to include more than just quality and price. So it used to be MEAT. I used to have an obsession with MEAT, MEAT, most economically advantageous tender. It's not that anymore, because you've also got your HSE, you've got your JEDI. So you got health, sustainability, and environmentals, and you got JEDI, which is justice, equality, diversity, and inclusion. You've got to supplement with all of your policies and how you demonstrate compliance with those. But it's also part of your social value. So you've got your qualitative responses, you've got your pricing, and then your social value. Now, social value, I actually had a really long conversation about this. It's an important point to note, because a lot of big national firms can't actually respond to this. It's very much more about the local suppliers. Social value is, what are you going to do to better the area that this contract supports? So if you are responding to a contract in West Berkshire, say, and you live in London, or you're based in London, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to respond to that requirement. We're in Lewisham, and our company's based in Lewisham, and we are responding to a tender in Lewisham. Then you can employ local people, you can use local transport, you can trade with local suppliers, you can employ people, you can go to local schools. There's all this stuff that you can deliver. Now, typically, there is the Public Procurement Act provides an instruction about how that should be split. So typically, you're seeing somewhere between 40 and 60% on quality, and then you got 30 to 40% on price, and then the remainder is split up typically on HSE. So you'll either get a few sustainability questions where just because you have an ISO 14001 doesn't mean that you're going to get full marks, and then your social value as well. So no, there's a really healthy split.
I often find on these podcasts, we usually have a structure, but sometimes I like to throw that out the window and carry on down a rabbit hole. So if we think about social value for a second, and for anyone watching who's, like you mentioned, being local and actually being able to have an impact on the local area counts towards social value. Mm-hmm. Are there any practical tips you can give someone who's going to be tendering for how to actually demonstrate how they've had or will have social value?
Yes, I can. And so firstly, in order to respond to that fully, it's important to note that there are lots of different ways to demonstrate impact. So social value is about understanding how what you do impacts people in the area. So for example, you could have an area that is very, very high crime, and you have a lot of young people that are exposed to crime and gangs. So you may wish to support local initiatives and provide funding, laptops, tech that have all been cleansed, because funnily enough, there are always IT recyclers in the area, and you could commit to giving so many laptops during the course of the contract. You could go in and do workshops and CVs and CV practice. And then similarly, you could also be in an area by where it's very, very rural. And then it could be about, well, everyone goes out and does litter picks. I mean, most parish councils these days and town councils pay for litter pickers because they want to be seen as like respectful and beautiful. So they don't want to leave it to just general public. So they pay for somebody to do it. But what is missing there is greening. So rewilding. So you commit to buying trees or rewilding or funding a rewilding activity. So there are lots of different ways, and you demonstrate the impact. So the way that I structure it is, it's really important to understand who is the in administration council. So it's a quick look on the website, and you go, oh, it's a Green, Reform, Tory, Labour. You pick your council, and then you have a look at what their mandates are, what's important to them. And if they're all about providing experiences to young people and development and allowing entrepreneurship, you kind of base it off that. The second thing to note is about looking at how they want you to demonstrate value to them. So they'll either follow the Public Procurement Act 2023 guidelines, which is, include a series of statistics that you would mandate to yourself that you're going to complete if you are awarded the contract, and then you report upon those statistics once a quarter or once a year, depending on what your commitment is in the bid, that you get to text, that you get a write, or they'll say, we would like you to sign up to this social value framework, which is a chargeable thing that they want you to cover the cost for. So just to be a member of that, it's like, I forget what it is. There's one framework that I see quite a lot at the moment, and it's either 10% or $2,500 a year, whichever is the greater, which is annual revenue of a contract, which can actually be rather sizable. So typically you find those on the bigger bids. And then from there, they'll actually send you reminders and prompts. You go in and you add your data. But even there, it's a bit like a shopping list. You go in and you say, I'm going to do 3 of that one and 2 of this one, and provide 6 hours of that. So even then, it's very, very structured, and they tell you what's important. The biggest thing that any supplier can do who's looking to respond to public sector is understand how the scoring works.
And maybe that's a great segue into maybe explaining actually how the scoring works and some advice around that.
So there's 2 ways to answer this. So the social value response, just to complete that kind of section there, the council will tell you, so they typically will either say, it's really, really important that we have opportunities for young people. So you're going to get more points for that. And they're not going to give you like a firm scoring matrix, because a lot of this is subjective. When you're looking at the other responses, you typically, you're either scored out of 10 marks or 5 marks per question. And typically, if it's out of 5, it's 2 and below are deemed as non-compliant, and therefore your bid goes in the bin. And it's important to note here that if you get 1 question that's 2 or below, your entire bid goes in the bin, because you are considered non-compliant in one area. And then on a 10 or out of 10 marks, it's typically 3 or below. And within each response, you need to have a commitment statement. You need to be saying what qualifications you've got that align with the response. You need to articulate what your process is, who is responsible for that process, a little bit about their hierarchy and structure, typically an escalation matrix, a couple of references, and then where that dovetails into the wider process. So a great example is, you're looking to build a building, and then there's change control because you're doing a build that is 5 years long, it's 1 year overrunning, and they want to change it from being being an oil boiler to ground source heat pumping. How does that then change the building? What needs to be changed? Do you stop all works? Can you run stuff in flight? And actually, that's a very good question. How do you respond to change or change control during a bid? It's typically within the project management section. And when you talk about that, you'd overview your process. You'd include your people, who the project change would be seen by, managed by. If there's a commercial arrangement, how that would then be agreed and documented, how the invoicing would work. And then obviously you would reference as an addendum or an appendix the documents that you're going to attach in order to substantiate what you've said.
it would be great to talk about some common mistakes that you see happen a lot when submitting bids.
Oh, a real good one that that I see when we are QAing someone's bid. So not only do we write bids for people, we find, qualify, and respond. So we find bids, we write them, and then we qualify. So in that qualification, it can be, is this the right bid for you? Or it's, thank you for giving us your draft response. We're just going to double check this before you submit, sort of thing, and we give some feedback. And we look at the tender and we go, yeah, that's great. So you've got question 1 here, that's got 1,000 words. You've given me a 1,500 word response. That's immediately non-compliant. So your first 1,000 words would be taken, and the rest of that content would go in the bin. So I actually did this morning on the tray-in. We've got a bid that's being QA'd at the moment that we're going to send back on Friday, and 3 of the questions are over the word limit. That's a real good one. Another one where I've started to say a lot more of now is standardizing the way that they want you to respond in terms of the documents. And this is typically good for multi-lot frameworks. So if you are if you're a company that does electrical, mechanical, engineering, you've got say you do ground source heat pumping, you do solar panels, you PV and solar, you might look at this 12-lot framework that's come out and you think, oh, actually, I could respond to 5 of these. But of course, when you're doing the response, you might have the stock responses that you need, such as your PSQs or your SQQs, and just because we all love a good TLA. So those acronyms essentially relate to a questionnaire, to your supplier questionnaire. And that's the same regardless. But then, of course, you get into your lot-specific material. So you're going to have lot 1, lot 2 responses, lot 3 responses, but they want the file names of each of those responses to be specific. So, for example, lot 1 - engineering - tender response. And if your response is not in that format, they will bin your response.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've started to see that. I've seen that in Scottish tenders, Northern Ireland tenders, and Welsh tenders. And I've seen it recently in a couple of tenders that are in London.
Oh, wow.
And I forget the name of the band, but back in the 80s, when I was a wee person, there was a band who very famously would go around and ask for Smarties, but the one in their room, in their gig room, they'd ask for Smarties in a bowl on a table, and they wanted all of one colour of the Smarties removed.
I think I've heard this before, actually.
Yes, I want to say Metallica, but I think I'm wrong. It might be Aerosmith. And they would know by going in there if their contract had been read.
Yeah.
And what's happening now is there are so many people that are responding to bids using ChatGPT or another AI that in order to make it such that they know that the bid has been read, they try and enforce things in there that it's optional. Well, some of the stuff is optional that you can include, but things like mandating a file name. If your file name comes back and it's not compliant, the buyer will know that you haven't read, because typically those are things that people just simply don't look for.
So, for example, I'm submitting a bid. I use ChatGPT to write my responses,
Yep.
but actually I haven't gone through and seen that they're mandating a specific file name. So then when I'm saving my file and naming it,
Yep.
I don't know that's a requirement. And then it's easily
Correct.
detectable that it isn't me who's actually read and wrote this bid.
Correct. Well, actually, you mentioned a really interesting point there about detecting in using like chat. So Crown Commercial Services, when they were releasing, or because I went to the Public Procurement Act 2023 launch event, and in there they had several vendors who were showcasing their AI detection tools that are given away freely to councils. So the second a bid comes in, it gets scanned, and if there's AI in the bid, it's not that there's a problem if there's AI in the bid, but they just make sure that a human goes over that bid quite a lot, and it's reviewed and it's flagged as a potential. Now, obviously, when you're looking to work to a very restrictive word count, sometimes, using Grammarly or some of the other free tools, you can rewrite sections of that bid to reduce the word count. There's also some really fantastic tools out there. So what's it called? Contract Finder Pro. They've got something called Tender Ninja, where you can go in and you can write a bid response, but that does come up quite AI heavy, and it won't pass an AI test. The tool that I like in there that I've used on occasion is their rewrite tool, where if I'm looking to cut out, if I've used every word trick I know and I still need to cut like 5 words, they're quite good at kind of looking at certain paragraphs and saying you can rephrase this to that, and you can cut 2 words there and 1 word over there, and that's how I'm compliant on that one.
If our audience were to ask, should they be using ChatGPT? Am I right in thinking your answer would be, don't use it strategically?
Well, I mean, so you're speaking to someone here who's done an MBA in AI, in all the free time that I have between running 2 businesses and elected member of council. And I completed my MBA this year, actually. So when it comes to using AI, you know what? We all do. We all use AI. We at Tender Response, we use AI as part of our process. We have a detection tool that runs over our bid to see how much of it is AI. If we've got AI from one of our writers, it gets kicked back because it's not compliant. It's actually in the contracts that you're not allowed to use AI. And if we get content from our customers, which is AI, we flag it, because sometimes they don't know that members of their team are using AI, because it pulls through really, really badly. And I'll say this now, and I do mean it desperately. We don't AI our responses. Our responses are human produced. We have an AI tool that looks at quality of the response in order to make sure that it's compliant. If you run a bid straight through ChatGPT, you will get an average score of a pass mark. A pass mark is 5 out of 10. A pass mark is 3 out of 5. You are never going to be hitting that quality response. And the reason I say that is because regardless of how brilliant you are at using AI, you will never get the wireframe down of all the stuff that needs to go into that response. Because if you look at, for example, a question is, describe your process, your project management process, in order to ensure that this project will deliver to time and to budget. Right? So you talk about your project management. That's not what that question is asking. That question is saying, well, it says to time and to budget. So in there, you need to be talking about what happens when you get problems in logistics, when you get problems at site, what happens if you start excavating and you find them, the Black Plague, like a burial mound. What happens if you find Neolithic architecture down there, not Neolithic, Roman architecture down there? Very similar to what happened with the Elizabethan line and HS2. What happens when you come across those instances? What's your escalation matrix? How do you then manage risk? What risks have you found in this project, and how would you propose to mitigate those? Now, when you actually look at what the question was to what needs to go into that response, it's chalk and cheese. Which is why, if you are going to use Chat or Copilot or Claude or Grok or whatever it is, first thing I'd say is that your bid is only ever going to be a first draft. Yep.
Yeah.
The second thing I'd say is that be very, very mindful of your information, because unless you're using your own custom chats or your Copilot works or your own restricted environments and the other AIs, when you upload your policies, your references, your case studies, your financial information into AI, into that bot, you are essentially putting it out into the open internet, because there are no restrictions. So if you are concerned about your data integrity, if you've got permission to share the content, but obviously within a bid format, but not on the internet, which a lot of public sector do. So if you deliver services to any central government, MOD, army, military, or even if it's an organization called AMI. So AMI is typically the contractor that's on most military bases. If you're a subby for them and you go out and do work and you blast that all over the internet, you're not allowed to do that, and you can run the risk of losing contracts. Similarly, if you pop information into ChatGPT or Copilot Web, I think it's called, you have no restriction over that data, and there is no restriction over that data, so you have no control. So use it at your risk.
Okay, Vicky, it would be great to get some top tips for SMEs bidding in construction.
Oh, wow. Oh, what a fantastic question. First thing is first. The second that you start bidding in public sector, there's a couple of things that you need to have. So you need to have your cyber essentials, which is basically an annual check of all of your softwares and your equipment to make sure that they're up to current IR standards, which is a preventative measure for you guys getting hacked. So that's a 1 year thing, costs a couple of £100. You need to have it done. Bish, bash, bosh, job's a good one. You need to have an outline policy of what your social value is going to be, so that when you get asked, you have a policy. A lot of people say, "Oh, we'll wing it." Wing it isn't good enough. You need to have a policy. Construction is actually really good because typically in construction, hard and soft FM, that real space there, you've got wonderful opportunity to provide work experiences and opportunities for neat people. So that's not it's young people that aren't in school or education or formal education. You can provide opportunities for those that carry an otherwise able position, such as Down syndrome, or they have a mobility issue where they're in a wheelchair, say. That's really, really good, but you need to have a policy. You need to have that one down. And construction, particularly in London, and in particular, well, any big city really, is get on your frameworks, because that's where all the work is done. The subtlety here, and I'll say this, is when it comes to public sector procurement, there are certain values. And if you know how those values work, you can play it to your advantage. So you have low value procurement system, LVPS, where if it's 50 grand or under, you can just buy straight through there. Yep. Now, there are some minor level construction bits that are in there as well. So if you're on there and it's 12 grand, you can just pick up that work really easy by speaking to the person or speaking to the project manager at the council and just say, yeah, I'm on that framework, and you can buy from there. That application can be done in an afternoon, and it takes about 2 weeks to come back. So that's a really quick and easy one. There are central frameworks available where you have to write some written responses, attach some references, and those are a little bit longer. You can typically get them done in about a day. You need to get on those, because the second that you're on those, it's a bit like being in the back room at a pub. You get to go out and you get to enjoy everything that's going on in like the main pub, but you get to go back and get away from all the noise and be in that area that's specific for you and your business. As an example, it's not in construction, but I think it's actually quite poignant. There's one of my customers is a cabling contractor. So they work with IT companies, and they go out and they do like all of the LAN setups, so they put all the cabling in. They'd really wanted to do some work in care homes, because in care homes, everything now is on an Ethernet cable. And I got them on a framework. A couple of weeks later, I spoke to them. They'd picked up 12 grand's worth of work just by being on that list and being an accredited supplier on that list. So if you're in the right place and if you know where you're going, that's how you pick up the business. In terms of your accreditations, you need to have your ISOs done, which is your 9001, 14001 and 45001. You've got to have your HSEs, so that typically that is your 45001, but just because you have one accreditation shouldn't exclude you from having other ones. So you can think about your CHAS and your safe contractors. I've only ever seen one council ask for a construction line, but I anticipate that will become more prominent, because it's a badge that's very common in the public and in the private sector space.
Some excellent tips right there, Vicky.
It's accreditation heavy. And the one thing that I haven't mentioned there is that if you haven't got your cyber essentials, if you were to Google it, you come up with all these kind of like there are lots of providers who do cyber essentials certification. There are two companies that I work with quite a lot, and they are very responsive, and they're quite honourable because they just do cybersecurity. And there have been two customers of mine who went and tried to get their own, and it was going to cost them several £1,000s, and as a result they were going to come out of a bid, whereas the two companies that I work with, both of them are coming in under £1,000. So those companies are Get Looply and UK Cybersecurity Group, and I recommend them highly, because I don't get any commission. I refer them freely because it's the right thing to do.
So it's been a fantastic conversation so far. Before we let you go, it would be great to get your view on the future of public procurement.
Oh, wow. Well, I have the benefit of having my two hats. So what I will say is that from what I've seen from being on the councillor side and from speaking to other elected members who also have similar responsibilities, public sector procurement is going to be standardised quite a lot. And you got local government reorganisation, so you got a lot of the devolution and stuff, and you got councils merging, which means that you're going to have fewer procurements. Those procurements are typically going to be done through more frameworks. They're going to be standardising a lot of their terms, which then of course means that you've got to be on the right frameworks. So the two things there: one, you've got to be on the right frameworks, and the second thing is that you've got to have a lot of your stock content already down, so that when you are responding to these frameworks, it's quick and easy to do so. Now, you don't need a bid manager to do that for you. You don't need a bid writer to do that for you. You can do that yourself. But of course, if you are operational in your business, then any time that you spend writing that is going to be taking you away from actually doing the do. So get ready. When it comes to frameworks, under Public Procurement Act 2023, there are no more 5-year frameworks, 10-year frameworks. There are breaks every 6 months where you can choose to join again. So if you're an existing supplier, it's like an opt-in, opt-out because you were compliant before. So you just take a box and you opt back in. But it then opens it up to new suppliers. So if you miss this round, or you're non-compliant this round, or you miss the mark, you can reapply again in a few months' time. So get ready, get applying, get on the frameworks, and start winning money.
Thank you very much, Vicky. And last but not least, for any of our audience that want to get in contact, where's the best place to reach out and get in touch?
Oh, fantastic. So my name's Vicky Poole. I'm the director here at Tender Response. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can speak to a member of my team at sales@tenderresponse.co.uk or admin@tenderresponse.co.uk, and one of the girls there will be in touch.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Vicky.
Thank you.